Empowering the world through connection. We believe strategic partnerships are the catalyst for scaling businesses, driving growth, and creating lasting impact. Welcome to the podcast.
Uh, I, I've exited two eight-figure businesses, and now what I love to do is coach people and help them do the same. And I believe that there's a lot of misinformation out there about, not only buying a business, but selling a business, right? And there's this huge disconnect, in my opinion, out in the business world about, that things like valuation of businesses. And I think in many states, brokers they can get a license without doing really much. And then they represent sellers, and the sellers are told that their businesses are worth X amount. And the market says no. There's no way that the business is worth that. And what it does is it creates this horrible imbalance in the marketplace because you have a lot of willing buyers. Some are trained by people like the groups that you and I are in. Others are just salt of the earth people that have spent years and years building their business, and they're trusting a broker to represent them properly. So when I coach people or I'm an advisor for people, I always like to tell them the real world behind everything that's involved in mergers and acquisitions, including how difficult the business is. When I started my first company back in 1984, we built organically to 30 million in revenue and almost 4 million in EBITDA. There were disasters all the time, all the time. In one instance, we burnt a restaurant to the ground. So I always try to be straight with the people that I work with because I always say M&A is simple, but it's not easy, right? Anybody can study the concepts. Anybody can learn what EBITDA is. Anybody can learn what, off market lead gen is. But unless you're willing and prepared to really spend the time, sometimes the money, because like any business, people get into business buying, for example, and they have no money. They can't even afford, to buy a domain. And that's not a good practice either, because any business, anybody who teaches anything about business will tell you that one of the biggest ways you fail in business is when you're undercapitalized. So from what it really means to run, scale, and grow a successful business to what's the real story out there in terms of selling your business, right? What is real valuation? And the problem that I see out there, Justin, is there's a lot of people telling sellers, for example, that their business is worth X, like I said before, and it really isn't. So then that creates this horrible dynamic, right? The seller gets upset at the broker. The broker starts scrambling to find buyers. A lot of the buyers they may have had that would have been approved buyers have left because the brokers try to bid the price up by using like crazy things like saying, there's 100 people bidding this $500,000 EBITDA deal. And, but good buyers know that's not true.
Yeah.
They understand when a business has strong transfer of value and when it doesn't. So it really has created dysfunction. It's the best way I can say it out in the marketplace. In terms of, what's my value add, I would tell you that it's a pretty well-rounded one, because since I was the CEO of my company and helped grow it to the 30 million, I also then dove deep in after being retired shortly into learning the M&A side and the consulting for equity side of the business. And I put a lot of effort into that, really learning that, because even when we sold our company to PE, I wasn't anywhere near knowledgeable about M&A or private equity. So one of the first things I did when I unretired was I started an independent sponsor private equity group. So we do bigger deals through that vehicle. And then, of course, I'm in Dealmaker and Carl's World and Equity Partner for more Main Street deals. So, yeah, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you for that. But I want to actually kind of resonate with the audience here. I want you to put yourself in the eyes of maybe a business owner that is getting up there in age as well, and he's thinking of potentially exiting his business, and he doesn't know the exact route. He thinks that maybe he doesn't have this picture in his mind what he's going to necessarily do right after. But I'm curious, what was going on in your mind when you were just about to exit, or you just exited? Like, how are you actually feeling through that process? Like, yeah.
No, it's another great question. I was 57 when I sold my company in 2018. So there is a lot of trepidation when you sell because, and not only regarding, who's going to buy you and the number that it's going to be. But like you said, what are you going to do afterwards? And
Yeah.
for me, I had always believed I would retire. I wanted to be one of the guys that retired in his 50s. And I tried that. And then I realized, wow, I don't like it. I like, yeah, I like the hunt. I like
Mhm.
and plus I love to teach and coach. My wife always said that. I said that to her through the years, that when I retired, maybe I'd go back and get my MBA and teach. And then I found a forum that I could coach and advise and teach. So I would tell baby boomers like myself, or old, people that are reaching that point where they want to sell their legacy, that you need to think that through clearly. But not always does what you think your future will be like turn out that way. So very often, like me, I was going to be the guy that told everybody I retired at 57, 58. And then it turned out that here I'm 64 and I'm loving doing what I'm doing, which is, mergers and acquisitions on the buy side. So, and it's interesting that you pointed out something, because one of the things that I love is that when I speak with sellers, potential sellers, either on behalf of myself on a deal or groups that I advise for, I always tell the seller, I was where you were. And it really works good. And I'm honest about it. I'll tell them, hey, look, I don't think you should do this or that, because I was in your shoes and it took us 3 years to sell because we did what you're thinking about doing and it didn't work. So I think it's important always to put yourself in another person's shoes. But I think sellers have to understand that again, I said it earlier, lots of misinformation out there. Make sure that you get the right team together. Just like you had a team together to grow your business, get the right team together to sell your business. And we didn't sell till we got an investment banker out of Chicago that really helped guide us to the point where we were able to sell to PE.
Yeah, that was one of my next questions, and thank you for going over that. Was throughout this process, there's a lot of team members that you could work with. There's a lot of people you're going to meet. I'm curious on what is the highest ROI partner that you have ever worked with, or maybe it's a handful of people.
Yeah. So when we had our first child in 1993, we were doing third shift janitorial services of restaurants and hotels, and I was burning out.
Mhm.
And I was going to either sell, having a little baby, being up at night. A couple of years after Erica was born, 95, I went to a conference or a convention, and I made a decision. I had to do something, either sell the business, because I was up often all night long, putting out escalations and problems, or bring on partners. And I ended up bringing on two partners in my business. And while things weren't always smooth, we're still friends to this day. And I brought in two people that had different skill sets that I felt I needed, because I knew my strength was marketing. So one of my partners had his master's in finance, and the other partner had run as a vice president of operations a janitorial company in New York City. So I brought on the skill sets that I needed to grow the business rather than just selling it at a steep discount. And by the way, that happens very often. Almost every day I come across a seller that wants to sell their business, but they're not ready. So what's going to happen is they're going to trade at a much lower valuation. And one of the things that I should say we, because I'm building a team around us, one of the things that we do is help that business owner understand that they built a great business, but their business is probably not worth a lot. The transfer value is just not there. Maybe because their books aren't clean. Maybe it's because all the customers are in their head and all the relationships are in their head. So we help them restructure their business to where often in as little as a year or 18 months, they can, 5 or 10 times the valuation of their business. Not by making that many changes, but one of the big changes is helping them remove themselves or helping them build a team like I did in 1995 so that I could really scale and grow the business. And, like I like to tell that story, that, we didn't have some miracle vacuum when, I brought those two gentlemen on. It's not like we had, what would be akin to the Apple iPhone when it first came out. But now we had people with different skill sets. It allowed me to be sort of the visionary, it allowed me to go out, and still did a lot of sales and marketing. Eventually, I took over as the CEO for the entire company because these gentlemen were considerably older than me. But I think that's the biggest one. My second biggest ROI would be right after I sold my business. I was convinced into investing a large portion of the money that I got from my company into a couple commercial apartment buildings, multifamily. And it turns out myself and a good buddy of mine, our third partner, was not able to really put a lot of time into turning these properties around. It was also a property management company. And that was my second big exit, but I never thought it would be. And I didn't really have that much experience in multifamily. I had mobile home parks and a lot of single family homes. But that ended up being one of my greatest ROIs because, the old saying, desperation, turns into inspiration. And we had so many problems with these buildings that we literally had to go there weekly to Tampa from Palm Beach, where I live. And literally just myself and Joel, we turned those communities around and we sold them at the right time, which was the fall of 2021, before interest rates went up. And we were able to do really well, not only for ourselves, but for the guy that really didn't have the bandwidth. And he was really the main multifamily guy, but he had like 8 or 10 other properties and he had problems at those other properties. So we were okay, whatever, we'll take over. And, learned as we were doing it, and we're able to exit that at a really, really great, what they call cap rate in multifamily real estate. So yeah, those are the two big ROIs for me, I think.
Love that. And thank you for going over. That sounds like awesome. Uh, Actually, exit honestly, and a great strategy right after. I think most people should be thinking of that too. I have one question, and I just want to know if you have any major regrets throughout the whole process.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy because my wife actually gets mad at me. I don't really have a lot of regrets. And when I have regrets, they're stupid things like we just built a mountain house and like, why didn't I do it 10 years ago? Those are the kind of regrets I have. I rarely ever have regrets about anything. And if I start to, I train my mind that it's useless. I think
Yeah.
regrets are dumb. They're useless because they don't serve any purpose. And if you're going to build a business, you're going to have regrets. There's going to be disasters. And I teach that to my clients. But it's how you handle those disasters, right? That's the key to business. I'll never forget. I talked about it earlier. We burned a restaurant to the ground. I was in a very nice outfit that morning, and I was going to meet a potential client that was going to give us a nice chunk of business. Found out about the kitchen catching fire, and within an hour. Now at that point, we were in 29 states. We probably had 1,000 people cleaning for me, and I was wiping soot off the wall. This was like maybe, I don't know, 20 plus years into the business, and I was wiping soot off the wall. And we did whatever it took to make that customer, we did everything we could. We handled all the insurance aspects and got him, lost what they call loss of use. And that guy is still a friend of mine today. So you imagine that we burned his restaurant down. He couldn't be open for like 3 months. And, but that opened up a door, and he eventually sold the restaurant, went into another restaurant chain, and we ended up cleaning that account for him. So, you do whatever it takes, and you don't have regrets, and you weather the storm, and you got a great chance, especially in this country with a free enterprise system. Anybody can start a business, anybody can get involved in a business, and you just have to understand the expectations, right? So regrets often come from people that have just misguided expectations. But if you go into a business knowing it's going to be tough at times, if you go into a business knowing that you're going to have to properly set your business up for sale, then your expectations are aligned and they're in the right place. So, yeah, I don't have many regrets.
I love that. I love the expectation thing. I think that's huge. Is there anything that you would do differently, starting from like you're just about to sell your business or you're going through this process? Is there anything that just stands out to you? Is like, well, if I could go back, I'd probably change this one thing. Maybe I don't regret it, but like it's just something that could have benefited me a little bit more.
Yeah, the one thing that pops up in my mind is we grew to 30 million in revenues, believe it or not, all organically.
Mm.
Um, Now we would open up offices in different areas as we grew with customers. But now that I know what I know, both from private equity and friends of mine like Carl Allen and Chris and Ross, now that I know about acquisitions, we probably would have been $100 million company because the
Yep.
platform company that bought us in private equity, I'm good friends with the CEO, and he at one point in our careers we were the same revenue. What he did differently was he got a private equity to fund his growth, and he started buying companies, and ultimately we were one of them. So, I would have done mergers and acquisitions instead of just growing completely organically.
Hmm. Interesting. No, that absolutely. It's like definitely everything that we're learning in the process, right? A
Absolutely.
non-organic strategy to compound wealth. And I feel like a lot of business owners don't understand that there are those options, right? Because they're not speaking with private equity every day. Um, what do you think, like, what do you want the audience to know that we didn't cover here? Like, is there anything out there that, like, hey, if I could just get this off and this one thing to help ease their mind or help them with this process, what do you think that would be?
Well, I think it depends on who it's aimed to, right? So if it's what you were talking about before, your traditional baby boomer, let's say, that's getting near retirement, they need to put the same effort into figuring out how to sell their business that that matches the effort that they put in growing their business.
Mm,
Because most people retiring with a business, whether it's a Main Street business, lower middle market, mid market, they've done a pretty darn good job in that business, right? Even if it's throwing off, 750,000 in EBITDA or profit, most likely, they've worked really hard for that, and it's probably put their kids through school. But that doesn't mean they know how to sell. And that's the big fundamental difference. That's why it took us 3 years to sell. We had good numbers. We had a little bit of a customer concentration, but we were able to overcome that. We didn't pick the right broker. Our financials, we had a CFO, but our financials weren't really where they needed to be, especially for private equity. We didn't have we didn't have audited financial statements. Ultimately, we didn't have audited financials, but we had reviewed financials. So the takeaway is there's a lot to do when you are ready to sell your business, and sometimes you need time.
yeah.
For us, it was 3 years. In those 3 years, although we were super frustrated, and it wasn't like we didn't have offers, we ended up getting probably a better valuation because slowly but surely, some by mistake, we learned how to position our business the right way. And we ultimately were able to probably sell for more than we would have 3 years earlier. So I think, sellers out there, take your time, get the right people around you to to tell you not what you want to hear, but to tell you the truth about the
Yeah.
valuation of your business. So if you've got a company that's doing $500,000 in EBITDA, it's not going to trade at a 10. But I see that all the time, right? It's going to trade between a 2 and a 4.
Mhm.
Um, but it might be pretty easy for you to work with somebody so that in a year or two, that 500,000 in EBITDA is 1,500,000, and then it might trade at a 6 to 8 or a 5 to 7. So it's that multiple is determined by typically the quality of the business and the size of the business, right? So a large portion of buyers out there won't touch a business that's under 1.5 million to 2 million in EBITDA. And there's over, I think last I heard, $2 trillion in dry powder in the private equity markets to buy businesses. But they're only going to touch a certain kind of business. They're only going to touch a business that has reasonable amount of EBITDA to make it worth their while. A profit, for people of you who don't know what EBITDA is, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Also, they want a business that isn't just the owner, right? Because if the owner leaves, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, or God forbid something happens to them, then private equity doesn't want to have to run the business. So they're going to pay a premium if there's, let's say, a middle management to that business, and if there's standard operating procedures in place. And that's kind of what I do, right? I have a team. We work with businesses that are either preparing for sale, or maybe they're not necessarily ready to exit, but we know many ways where we could create some transformational value to their company, which ultimately, when they are ready to exit, is going to mean a lot more money to them. Because it's that multiple arbitrage that's the key to making a lot of money in your business. So if you sell your business at a 2, um, then yeah, you're only getting 2 times your profit. But if you're able to, double or triple the size of your business in a year or two, well, now you're going to sell at a multiple of 5 to 7. So just that arbitrage and multiple means millions to that retiring uh, baby boomer, that retiring owner of the business, who's put all these years of hard work, and then they get to the point where they want to sell, and they're not getting the valuation they deserve.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so you're saying for somebody that actually has exited two eight-figure businesses, it's would be a better plan if a business owner was planning on exiting instead of running out and grabbing a like a business broker right away or just trying to sell it and getting this unrealistic expectation of a purchase price for your business just to fail later on. It would be better to work with somebody like you or your team to actually develop the value of the company throughout a couple years so you can get the maximum exit price at the end.
100%. And look, if you're doing 10 million in EBITDA, uh, I'm probably not your person. You don't need me. But just as an example, when we sold our company, we had a C-suite. I had a CFO, I had a COO, I had a CMO. We had a kind of a fractional CTO. We had a whole level of middle management. We had general managers and branch managers in some of our locations. So we were more sellable. Whereby some businesses, the owners don't want to give up control and they don't delegate and they don't have systems in place. So they're not as marketable. So
Right.
absolutely, that's, you know, it's worth it if you put all these years in to take a year or two and make sure that your business is going to sell for the maximum valuation. I mean, why shouldn't it?
Right.
And brokers don't tell, a lot of brokers don't tell their clients that. They just want the listing, and they tell them some unrealistic price, and then a year down the road the business hasn't sold and they lost a year, and then they finally face the reality that their business isn't worth what the broker told them it was worth.
And they
I've
could have
seen, yeah,
no, they could have spent that time actually developing the business and instead, huh? Um,
exactly.
I know we're reaching the end here, Leonard. And I appreciate all of your time. It's been a pleasure. I want to know where we can send the audience to for them to check you out. Is there a link or anything like that we could put in the video?
Yeah, first off, no worries. I'm always happy to help. I think almost every client that we've gotten justice, we've helped first with no strings attached. So if something happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I lost, whatever, an hour with them. But I always feel good if I can help somebody, even if I can't monetize that. Probably the best way to reach me is Lenny at emccapitalgroup.com. That's EMCCAPITAL group. .com, no space. So just EMC Capital Group with two C's, or our website, www.emccapitalgroup.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. Don't even know what my profile address is. I'm not great with technology, but yeah, just best way for me. Maybe I'm old school is email.
Yeah.
And always happy to help. Always happy to just kind of tell people the experience I went through, right,
Yeah.
as a seller. Because there's that one last point. There's people out there that you know claim to be a guru about how to sell your business, but they never sold their business. They've never exited a business, but they take a course and all of a sudden they're an expert, right? I've lost deals because I've told sellers, listen, you don't need me, or I'm not the right guy for you, because I truly like to see it from their lens, because I was a seller and I remember the frustration we had. In fact, I wrote an article about how it took us 3 years to sell in acquisitions aficionado. So, yeah, I mean, happy to help anybody that needs it. And, just love this kind of questionnaire, because what you're doing here, Justin, is powerful. Because, again, there's a horrible uh, misrepresentation, disconnect out there in the M&A world, especially on smaller deals. And it's important that the message gets out that people shouldn't be sacrificing their hard-earned effort and work in building a business only to get a small value, a much smaller valuation than they probably could have gotten if they just stayed at it a little bit longer.
Well said, well said. And all the information, your contact information, we're going to put in the link of the video so people can easily access you. Leonard, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do another podcast soon.
I would love that. Uh, Great thing that you're doing, sir. Great thing.
Thanks, Leonard. Bye.
Thanks so much.